Story time about the craziest thing I saw while working at a mental health facility. I work in a mental health facility as a psychiatric technician. My job is to help people with mental health distress by providing emotional support, helping develop positive coping skills, and provide medical attention. Some of the individuals that I treat have severe mental illness, which can lead to violence. One day I was assigned to a patient that I'll never forget. He was on a 24-hour observation because he was self-harming and deemed high risk. He had tried to harm others earlier in the day, so he was locked into a padded room with only a bed, a bathroom, and a tear-proof blanket. I was assigned to watch him for the day from outside of the room to ensure that he wouldn't harm himself until he could be seen by a doctor. He was talking about things that made absolutely no sense, running around in circles inside of the room and asking me if I was Jesus. He would start screaming at the top of his lungs about random things, curse at me 1 minute then apologize the next, and kept spitting on the window just to wipe it off a few seconds later. I attempted to calm him down, but he was on a rampage. At one point, he turned his back to me and appeared to be rubbing his eye for some time. However, when he turned around, I almost passed out. He had ripped his eyeball completely out of the socket and began tossing it up and down in the air while calmly singing to himself. The situation only got worse from here. Part 2 of the craziest thing I saw while working at a mental health facility. The man continued throwing his eyeball in the air and catching it while calmly singing slow jams. In disbelief, I immediately called for the guards to come and help me. As they came running, I told the man to stop playing with the eyeball and put it down. He then flashed me a smile and put his eyeball close to his mouth. I knew where this was going, so I begged him not to do it. He proceeded to put his eyeball in his mouth and began intensely chewing it. The guards unlocked his door and rushed in. He was jumping and running around trying to avoid them. When they finally got him restrained and under control, they told him to open his mouth and spit out the eyeball. Sure enough, he quickly swallowed it. I asked him why he would do that, and he told me that President Ronald Reagan told him to. He said it's okay because he still has another eye left and he could see just fine, and that he only wanted to have one anyway. That's when the ambulance arrived to come and take him to the hospital. When the paramedics asked him what happened to his eye, he proceeded to throw up on demand in front of everyone. He pointed to his chewed up eyeball and the pile of vomit on the floor and asked them if they could put it back in his eye socket for him. After going to the hospital, he was transferred to a different facility for a higher level of care. To this day, whenever I see someone rubbing their eye, I get squeamish. Story time about how I was saved by drag queens. My friend and I had made plans to meet up over the weekend to grab a drink. When I showed up, my friend texted me last minute bailing due to a family emergency. Since I was already downtown, I decided to grab a drink by myself. I take myself out on dates all the time, so I didn't think it was a big deal. While I was walking to the bar, this guy approached me and asked what I was up to for the night. I told him what happened and he invited me to hang out with him and his friends. I made it clear to him that I wasn't looking for anything other than friendship, and he quickly replied that he respects it. With this, I felt more comfortable and started hanging out with him and his friend group, which was a mix of guys and girls. We all made our way to the bar and started drinking. That's when I befriended another group of people. I introduced both groups to each other and everything seemed to be going great. A few people from the new group came up to me and asked me how long I've known the guy for. I told them that I just met him an hour ago. They gave me a funny look and told me that he's been talking about me like we've known each other forever and are dating. I was a little creeped out, but I thought that maybe he was just drunk. That's when they said he's also been going around the bar talking to random guys about selling me. This is when my heart dropped and I started to panic. I was terrified because I was alone, drunk, and felt like this man had something terrible in store for me. Part 2 of how I was saved by drag queens. When the people from the new group told me that this guy was talking to them about selling me, I was shocked. I stood there for a minute in disbelief as I racked my brain thinking of what to do. I was too drunk to drive home and I was paranoid of everyone around me at this point. When he wasn't paying attention, I slowly made my way out of the bar. I bolted it to my car and decided that I would sleep it off until I sobered up. When I was a few feet away from my car, I hear footsteps running behind me. I glanced back to see the guy from the bar running towards me. Panic jolted through me and I quickly unlocked my car door. I jumped in and locked the doors behind me. He tried to open the door and then started pounding on my driver's side window, threatening me. A few minutes passed, but he wasn't letting up. Suddenly, someone pushes him to the ground and I look up to see that it's a group of drag queens. I thought I was seeing things for a second, but they tell him that they saw everything and if he gets near me again, they're going to rearrange that ugly mug. He stumbles to his feet and sprints off. I think they could tell that I was shaken up because they invite me to come to their show at the bar nearby to calm down. They spend the next couple hours with me as I watch each one perform and made sure that I got home safe by the end of the night. I'll always be thankful to them. Story time about how my friend scheduled her wedding on the day of my family's death anniversary. 7 years ago, I lost my husband, daughter, and mother to a car accident. They were hit by a drunk driver that drove through a red light and killed all of them on impact. Their deaths greatly affected me. If it weren't for my friends and years of therapy, I would be in a much lower place. I'm thankful for their support and have been able to process my grief properly. 2 years ago, I took a better paying job and moved to a different city. It's a 7-hour drive, but I travel back occasionally to visit friends and of course my family's graves on their death anniversary. My friend Amy announced that she was engaged last year to her boyfriend of 3 months. My friend group and I were shocked because we never met him or knew that she was even dating anyone. Nonetheless, we were happy for her. They postponed the wedding due to COVID, but now the cases in my country are less than 10 and she's having it. Last week, Amy called me to tell me that she scheduled her wedding on the same day as my family's death anniversary. She asked me not to visit their graves and attend her wedding instead. I asked her why she picked that date and she told me that she wanted to and I can't gatekeep a date. Then I asked her why I can't visit their graves and she said it's because she doesn't want my sadness and grief to take the attention away from her wedding. When I told her I wouldn't miss visiting my family's graves, things got complicated. Part 2, how my friend scheduled her wedding on my family's death anniversary. I tried to compromise with Amy and tell her that I'd attend my family's graves after her wedding. She said she wanted my support for the entire day and dedicated towards her, but she'd think about my offer. She was there for me when they passed and I'm torn, but I refused to miss going to their graves. I called my other friends to let them know what Amy asked of me. They were livid for me as they had no idea what Amy was planning for the wedding. We arranged a Zoom call and discussed why she was being so insensitive towards me. It started off calm, then Amy just blew up. At first, she tried to explain that having a wedding on the same day would turn a negative situation into a positive one. When she realized it wasn't convincing enough, it felt as though a mask had fallen from her face and she started yelling and insulting me. She said she's tired of having to play the supportive friend role and that it's been 7 years, so I should just get over it by now or go join my family in the ground. My friends lost their anger and called her every name in the book. It hurt to have lost another person in my life, but in a sense, she never really was a good friend. None of our friends are going to the wedding now and have all blocked her on social media. My friends offered to go visit my family's grave with me and I accepted. We're planning to also make a scrapbook with my family's pictures in it. For once, I'm actually looking forward to this day. Crime Fanatic Friday, The Boy in the Box. The year was 1957 and it was a cold and dewy morning in Philadelphia. A man was poking around a portion of road that was used as a dumping ground for garbage. He poked something that he originally thought was a doll packed away in a bassinet box. He was so convinced it was a doll that he didn't call the police. However, the next day, a news report broadcasted a missing 4-year-old girl. This is when he questioned himself about the doll he saw and decided to call it in. When investigators arrived at the scene, they found wrapped in a flannel blanket was the nude, badly injured body of a little boy. Police estimated the boy to be between 4 to 6 years old with a full set of baby teeth. His cause of death was severe trauma to the head, but his body showed signs of years of abuse. He was malnourished, covered in bruises, had a scar under his chin, and surgical scars on his ankle and groin. The police were confident that this case would be solved quickly. However, days turned into weeks and no one came forward to identify the body. Hundreds of recruits scoured the woods looking for any clues. The paper distributed over 200,000 flyers. The child was unidentified for years to come. That is until 1998, when a segment of America's Most Wanted led to a spike in interest in the case. His body was exhumed for a DNA sample. Crime Fanatic Friday Part 2, The Boy in the Box. Sadly, the DNA and dental testing was a bust. Several people came forward with information relating to the case, but police weren't able to verify any testimonies. However, a few theories have been introduced over the years. In 2002, a psychiatrist called in about the case with a promising lead on behalf of a woman named Martha. During a 3-hour interview, Martha talked about her childhood. She told police her mother had purchased the boy in 1954 from his biological parents. The mother physically and sexually abused Martha and the boy. One day, the boy fell sick in the bathtub and the mother became enraged, beating him to death. She wrapped the boy in a blanket, put him in the car, and took Martha with her to dispose of him. However, Martha suffered from serious mental health issues and this made her an unreliable witness. An investigator who wasn't giving up on the case sought the help of a psychic in New Jersey. This psychic stated that the boy came from a house in Philadelphia which he described in great detail, despite never having been there. The house was less than 2 miles down the road from where the boy was found. It was a foster home ran by a couple who had over 20 foster children. They had a bassinet that they bought from an auction like the one that the boy was discovered in, as well as blankets similar to the one that the boy was wrapped in. After countless interviews, nothing concrete was found. To this day, the case is still unsolved. Story time about how a guy led me on, so I got with his dad. I had just moved out of my parents' place and moved in with some friends. I had been single for about 6 months after a 3-year relationship. During that time, I worked on myself while also mingling with people here and there, but no one seriously caught my eye. That changed when my friends had a kickback and invited a guy named Stefan. We were instantly drawn to each other and ended up talking closely the whole night. Then we started messaging and going on cute little dates. Over the next few weeks, I started developing real feelings for him. When I told him that I liked him, he reciprocated that he felt the same. One thing led to another and we started hooking up. He even introduced me to his dad who was divorced and his younger brother. I would give his younger brother rides to school sometimes when he or his dad couldn't. I'd also go over to his house and wait for him sometimes after class while hanging out with his family. Everything seemed to be going great and I thought that we would eventually make it official, but I wasn't in a rush or thinking too much into it. Then one day I texted Stefan for a quick hangout, if you know what I mean, before my class started. I was surprised to see him text back and say, "Nah, I'm gonna pass." I thought it was weird but respected it and assumed that he was just having a bad day. However, over the next few weeks he became distant and cold towards me. Then I found out why. Part 2 of how a guy led me on, so I got with his dad. One morning I woke up and texted Stefan the usual good morning text. When I didn't get a response all day, I just shrugged it off as him being busy. A short while later, I checked his story on Instagram and saw that he was with his coworker. When I clicked her tag and went to her profile, there was a picture of them together, kissing. I was hurt but mostly shocked. When I checked the post, it was clear that they recently started dating. He had commented a bunch of heart and kissing emojis under it as well. When I confronted Stefan, he acted like we were just friends and made me feel stupid for thinking there was anything there in the first place. I felt invalidated and crazy. Unfortunately, I had already told Stefan's dad that I would take his younger brother to school the next morning. When I showed up, his dad told me that he could actually take him. However, I asked to tag along since I was already there. After we dropped him off, we started talking about smoothies. Somehow, we ended up going back to their house and I made us smoothies. We were really getting along and spent the whole day together. The next night when Stefan wasn't home, we met up again. He made me dinner and we danced to some romantic music. I ended up hooking up with Stefan's dad that night. The next morning, I snapped a picture of us in bed and sent it to Stefan on Snapchat. He went ballistic and then I blocked him. I hooked up with his dad a few more times after that. Story time about how my grandfather single-handedly ruined the family name. My grandfather on my paternal side was a native of a small city. He was popular and known for having one of the best catering services in the area. He also owned a bank. His family was so popular that the other members in town owned businesses as well, such as flower shops, liquor stores, and so on. However, my grandfather was a huge narcissist. He was abusive to my father. When my father was only 7 years old, my grandmother passed away from cancer in her discs. She was the sweetest person and a ray of sunshine. Not even 2 months later, my grandfather brought home a minor who was only 16 years old and married her. He was already cheating on my grandmother with her. His new wife was also abusive towards my father in traumatizing ways. Even though he had a new wife, my grandfather still belonged to the streets. He was on a clapping spree most of his life, cheating on her with multiple women. Most of the time, to be able to do the deed, he would take Viagra. During one of his hookups, he had a heart attack and died with a full-on erection. The mortician needed help slaying his kraken for his viewing, so they had to tape it down to his thigh because it would not go down. His wife quickly found out about his affairs and was so angry that she buried him without a tombstone. This happened when I was around 12 years old. However, the story doesn't end there. Part 2 of how my grandfather single-handedly ruined the family name. After my grandfather's death, the kids from his previous marriages and his affairs came forward. Since my grandfather was wildly successful and rich, they started fighting with his wife to take my grandfather's house and belongings. It was a whole fiasco that involved court cases and lawyers. His widowed wife didn't want to deal with anything that had to do with him, including his children. She left all his belongings and house to them to fight over like cats and dogs. Due to this, the whole town found out everything that happened, including the cause of his embarrassing death. Plot twist, his widowed wife apparently already had suspicions that my grandfather was cheating on her, so she got herself a younger man on the side. Right after she buried him, she came out victorious with a younger man and moved to a different town in Puerto Rico. She was living like a queen on the beaches with her new man, while back in town, the family name was going to shambles. Their perfect exterior and fake facades had now crumbled as their dirty towels were being exposed. They went from a clean prestige title to being known as cheaters, starting from my grandfather to his children. All the boys in the family had cheated on their wives, including my father, who cheated on my mother when I was 7 with a 17-year-old. Now the family name is a laughingstock in that town. People who want to talk about scandalous things will always bring up that family name.